I think what's interesting to me about this is obviously this is adapted from the 1993 Tom Clancy novel, which was about the Vietnam War era. And yet here we are modernizing it, putting it in today's world. What's your take on why this is relevant in 2021 and what it has to say about the world we're in right now?
I think it's interesting. Like, I don't know if you noticed in Hollywood, but there is this kind of idea of like dusting off like 90s IP and trying to like modernize it and trying to like, bring people's attention back to it.
Yeah.
And I think, I hope that we've done a good job of that with this, whilst also paying homage to like the tropes of those 90s films. Like I think the idea of a man who loses everything and then goes on a hell-bent mission of redemption and revenge isn't a new idea, of course. But I think like hopefully the tonality of it, hopefully the lensing of it, I think it's really important to acknowledge that the fact that the mission that he goes on is led by a woman, is led by a woman of color who's also a Navy SEAL. I don't know how many of those exist in the world. I hope there are some, and I hope that there are more committed to film, especially. So I really hope that we're kind of like not dragging Tom Clancy, but kind of bringing Tom Clancy into 2021 and into the current culture in a way that feels inclusive and feels diverse and different from what we've seen before. So listen, I love those 90s movies. I love Hunt for October. I love Clear and Present Danger. Patriot Games is a little bit narcoleptic sometimes, but like, but there is intrigue in them. There is intrigue, and there is an observation about these institutions and how they work and what they do and the morality of these things that I think is important and is on the table to be talked about and to be questioned and everything else. So for me, like I get to play a really fun character. You never know what he's thinking. You never know what he wants. You never know like what if he's good or bad, and if you can trust him. So that for me, just from a performative point of view, is really fun. But I hope that the overall is something that is different in the Clancy universe.
Whew, a lot. I think just in the trailer alone, I also think just what is propelling John Kelly's movement to get revenge is very prevalent in what we're going through as far as loss and grief and life changing in an instant. And then I think anytime we can add some government conspiracy in a film, we'll start to move our minds around like that could make sense, right? And so I just think this film is on time, and we don't have anything like this out right now. And I think that everyone will be thoroughly entertained.
I think you're someone, I see you on screen, I immediately want to like your character. But from scene one, Ritter is like, I don't know about this guy. I'm like, who is this guy? Like,
he's a little
can we trust him?
He's a little turd, basically.
You said it, your words,
Yeah. I played him as such.
You want to project that more than you're letting on, but you also want that character to not be showing that because he's trying to hide it from everyone. How do you get in that headspace, for lack of a better way to put it?
I think you have to have a secret, right? You have to have a secret that nobody else knows, that even the filmmakers don't know, that the audience doesn't know, that your fellow actors don't know. And I came up with that like months before we started filming, which was like, what happens if this guy is going through a divorce? Like, what happens if he's experiencing something horrific personally, but at the same time has to deal with something so kind of like that has like such monumental consequence on the kind of Western world as we know it. Like, he's a family man, but what happens if his family is like deteriorating? He doesn't seem to be someone who can kind of identify with his own emotion. So what would that do to a person? And by the way, this is like really, really backroom.
I love it.
Subtext. But I thought like, I don't know if anyone's going to pick up on it. Like there's a couple of scenes where I have 2 cell phones on the table. Like I really fought for that stuff. I really fought to have like my own mug that says like, gone fishing or like whatever it is, like just very specific, like little things that says this man has a life outside of this stuff that's going on. And as much as corrupt and crazy and probably very arduous as I'm sure these positions are, and morally ambiguous as these things are, there must be something personal happening at all times that they probably can't show. So wouldn't it be interesting if that was happening at the same time? You're not going to get that from this movie. You're never going to acknowledge that. But like in my mind, I was like, that would be funny if, so that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, this is the context I want, though. I love this stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now I feel bad for judging him.
You should know this. Like Paul Reiser was a really
Yes.
informative his performance in Aliens was something that I really took a lot of reference from, because I think he's a very likable person, but you're always like something off about him, and that was something that I really looked to as reference.
And Pam, we don't really see a lot of her life before this moment, but I'm kind of curious, like how much of her story were you aware of? I know that there's a full story we get from her in the books, but this character is a little bit of a different version. Did you have this imagined backstory that kind of brought her to this place and brought her to John's life?
Yeah, well, part of my process, even in characters, is I ask myself 30 questions about the character that I can imagine and create. As small as like, what was her favorite food? And so as I am developing these characters, they start to come to life. And that is what I can bring to them. So I did that with Pam, as I also got to speak to a Navy SEAL's wife. Then Mike had someone that he was speaking to on set, and then his actual wife I got to have personal conversations with. She was very honest and very giving in her information and insight on what that is to actually be the wife of a Navy SEAL. And
wow.
that was a lot of my research in just access to what that life is.
So what did you pull from that conversation then? Like what really stood out to you that you wouldn't have expected maybe?
Well, her ability to hold space for him in two worlds, home life, and then who he was outside of home, and just her love and support and trust.
From what you just said, the other point I wanted to bring up, it's like, okay, well, what is Pam's favorite food? Now I'm curious.
I have to go back in my notes. I don't know.
It's in the notes.
But I know that she came from like a good home, like her mom and her dad were like.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was probably in my notes somewhere.
I love that as a process of getting to understand a character better. Where did that come from? How long have you been doing that?
Wow, it came from one of my acting coach. When I started, he would always say to not depend on the script to give you all the information, and to ask 30 questions. And the acting coach, his name is Michael Wilson, and so I would give him his credit and his flowers while he was here. And he would always say that. And so it's a fun, even if you don't ever use those questions, it is a really fun exercise to get into.
Michael B. Jordan, we got to talk about him. How could we not? Of course, People's Sexiest Man Alive, but also just seems like such a wonderful guy. And I wondered what you could tell me about working with him, as a scene partner, but just as a collaborator.
He was just extremely professional and respectful. I knew Mike before the film, so that was, I was really comfortable already just from being his friend before we started filming. And Mike was actually how I got introduced to the film. He actually reached out to me personally to invite me to be on the film.
Listen, I worked with him 4 or 5 years ago, right? And and at that time there was he was certainly like on a hot streak. Like this guy is heading like northwards, like he's going up, and that was not in question. But between then and me working with him here, he has achieved stratospheric global acknowledgement on his own merit. Because he's a dedicated actor, but also because he's charismatic as a movie star. And I think people have a real interest in him just personally. So when I went back to this, I was like, God, I really fucking hope Michael is the same Michael that I know, because it can change people, it can. It's an inflation of your ego. It's so many different things that are complicated about this business, right? So when I work with him again. Just to see that he doubled down on his dedication, his commitment, and the way that he raises up his friends and the people that he has in his life around him to important positions, and how he's done it with on his using his own identity through his own production company, and how he has a voice in the result of this movie and what that means to him, and just his dedication on the set and off the set as well. He's an inspiration to me, and now he's directing. That's something that I am obviously very interested in, and a role that I would love to have. So like just the way he's done it, I really admire him and really look up to him. So I'm also grateful to just call him a friend, because I think he's a good guy and everything else. So I'm privileged to be in another movie with him.
Has it occurred to you that perhaps John Kelly has done something we can't? Some situations warrant thinking outside the box.